cold darkness of a December night in 2010, a fierce wind swept over the empty dunes of Gilgo Beach, Long Island. Along Ocean Parkway, a Suffolk County police officer, with his determined cadaver dog by his side, was out on a routine search for a missing woman. Under a weak sliver of moonlight, and with the sound of crashing waves in the background, they made a discovery that would change everything. Partially hidden in the shifting sand lay the skeletal remains of a young woman, wrapped in tattered burlap, a grim sign of what was to come. In the days that followed, more horrors emerged from the murky shoreline. 3 additional bodies were found within a quarter mile of the first. It became clear that, for years, a shadowy predator had been stalking vulnerable women, many of whom had turned to sex work as a desperate way to survive. These victims vanished without a trace, leaving behind only despair and a long list of unsolved mysteries. This case would later be known as the Gilgo Beach murders, a name that represents both a series of brutal crimes and a community shaken by prolonged terror. The first group of victims, known as the Gilgo Four, included Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. Each of these women had once been bright and full of hope, despite living in a world that often showed them little mercy. They had sought connection and survival by advertising their services online, only to be caught in the cruel design of fate. As investigators began to gather the clues, it became clear that these were not isolated tragedies, but parts of a larger, interconnected story of violence that spanned decades. Even before the discovery of these 4 bodies, one case had set the investigation in motion. On May 1st, 2010, Shannan Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort, made a desperate 911 call from a client's home in Oak Beach, just east of Gilgo Beach. In a trembling voice, she pleaded, "They're trying to kill me." That heart-wrenching cry echoed through the night, launching a search that would last for over a year. Then, in December 2011, her skeletal remains were found in a nearby marsh. Unlike the others, her body wasn't wrapped in burlap, a detail that only deepened the mystery and left her family heartbroken. Although officials ruled her death an accident, blaming hypothermia or drowning, her loved ones could not accept that explanation. They wondered if she had been trying to escape a hidden danger too great to fight. As investigators delved deeper into these intertwined disappearances, a new suspect began to emerge. For years, the trail had grown cold, until a major breakthrough in March 2022. A dark green Chevrolet Avalanche seen near one of the crime scenes caught the attention of law enforcement. This vehicle, almost ghostly against the dark New York night, was linked to a man whose public image was the exact opposite of what the evidence was showing. Rex Heuermann, a Manhattan architect from Massapequa Park, suddenly became a person of interest. On the surface, he led an ordinary life, a successful career, a stable family, and a reputation as a reliable citizen. But behind that everyday mask, forensic evidence started to reveal a much darker truth. Cell phone records placed Heuermann near several of the crime scenes at the times the victims disappeared. Investigators also discovered that he had used a secret email account to search for disturbing content, specifically sadistic materials and images that oddly resembled those of the victims. In one startling twist, DNA collected from a discarded pizza crust matched Heuermann. Strands of hair found on the burlap further tied him to the scenes. Every bit of evidence, gathered and analysed over time, chipped away at the normal, respectable image he had carefully maintained for decades. In mid-July 2023, law enforcement acted decisively. Rex Heuermann was arrested in Midtown Manhattan, a moment that sent shockwaves through the community. He was initially charged with first-degree murder for the deaths of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. Soon after, additional indictments linked him to the murders of Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Jessica Taylor, Sandra Costello, and Valerie Mack. As the investigation widened, authorities uncovered even older cases that stretched back to the early 1990s. Every new discovery deepened the mystery and horror, suggesting that this was not the act of a temporary criminal, but the work of a meticulously operating predator whose terror spanned decades. The picture that emerged of Rex Heuermann was full of contradictions. To the public, he appeared to be the epitome of respectability. A family man, a devoted husband, and a successful architect who had worked in Manhattan since 1987. Yet behind closed doors, and in the records of his secret online searches, lay a disturbing obsession. His internet activity revealed a fixation on violent and explicit material, a clear sign of a desire to understand or even mimic the brutality he was accused of committing. Adding to the shock, it was later revealed that his wife and children were out of state during the times of the killings, a detail that only underlined how carefully premeditated his actions were. The stark contrast between his ordinary daytime life and the monstrous acts he was suspected of at night became one of the most unsettling aspects of this case. As the arrest reverberated across Long Island and beyond, the community was forced to face a reality that was both complex and horrifying. The Gilgo Beach murders were never just a set of isolated tragedies. They were a chain of events marked by loss, despair, and a stark reminder of a society that often neglects its most vulnerable members. Every victim had her own story, a life marked by struggle and the search for dignity in a world that often showed little kindness. Maureen Brainard-Barnes, for example, had been a devoted mother and a hard-working woman who was driven into sex work by crushing financial hardship. Melissa Barthelemy, also known as Chloe by some, was a young woman with dreams that were brutally cut short. Waterman, a mother fighting against exploitation, and Amber Costello, whose disappearance was shrouded in mystery and desperate hope, all became tragic symbols of a system that failed to protect them. In courtrooms filled with the testimony of forensic experts and a mountain of evidence, one lingering question continues to cast a shadow over the case. Did Rex Heuermann act alone? The evidence is strong, yet it leaves room for doubt. Over nearly 3 decades, the methods used in these murders varied widely. Some victims were found carefully wrapped in burlap, while others showed signs of rushed, haphazard disposal. A toddler's remains were found dismembered and abandoned, standing in stark contrast to the bodies of adult women who were concealed with more care. One victim even bore a distinctive peach tattoo, a grim detail that became almost a calling card. These differences raise questions. Are they simply a result of evolving methods over time, or do they hint at the possibility of multiple people being involved? Even as the case moves toward trial, many mysteries remain unsolved. The harsh reality of the Gilgo Beach case goes far beyond identifying victims or arresting a suspect. The community, long haunted by unsolved disappearances and the constant threat of hidden danger, remains gripped by fear. Every gust of wind along the coast, every rustle in the underbrush, feels like a reminder of the darkness that once ruled this area. For families who lost loved ones without closure, the arrest of Rex Heuermann is a bittersweet moment. It brings hope for justice, but also reopens old wounds. Behind the scenes, law enforcement and forensic experts are still working tirelessly. Advances in forensic genealogy now offer a hopeful chance that even the unidentified victims will one day be given names and their stories told. Investigators continue to re-examine decades-old records and old evidence, driven by a determination that refuses to let any piece of the truth be buried. Now, with the trial of Rex Heuermann expected to begin later this year or in early 2026, the case is at a turning point. In a recent legal filing, Heuermann's attorney, Sabato Caponi, made his position absolutely clear. He argued that the overwhelming volume and technical nature of the evidence, comprising lengthy testimony, multiple exhibits, and details spanning nearly 2 decades, requires a different approach. Caponi stated that trying all 10 counts in a single trial would risk overloading the jury with too much information, making it nearly impossible for them to focus on the relevance of each individual piece of evidence. In other words, Caponi insists that the cases involving the 7 women, whose deaths occurred between 1993 and 2010, are so different from one another that they should not be tried together in one trial. In simpler terms, inside courtrooms, where every detail is carefully examined, this request for separate trials highlights just how complex this investigation is. Each victim's case has its own unique background, and the legal system must handle each one with clear and focused attention so that nothing important gets lost in the shuffle. The story of Gilgo Beach is far from over. With every new piece of evidence and each courtroom revelation, another layer of this intricate case is exposed, a story that challenges our basic ideas of justice and accountability. For the families and communities still suffering from these losses, this legal battle is not just a procedural matter. It is a vital part of their ongoing search for closure and truth. The legacy of Gilgo Beach, etched into every grain of sand and whispered in every memory, stands as a powerful reminder of the relentless pursuit of justice in the face of overwhelming complexity. The fight against this darkness continues, along with the commitment to ensure that every victim is remembered and every unanswered question is eventually resolved.